Waiting all my life. I'm Bob Sager from Shelby County. I'm Bob Seivert from Shelby County Emergency Management and 911. I represent the Iowa Emergency Managers Association. Today is Thursday, February 8th at 9 o'clock. This is the regular monthly meeting of the Iowa 911 Council. At this time, we'll start with the council members on the left and introduce yourselves and who you represent, please.
I'm Wayne Johnson with CenturyLink. I represent large telco.
Blake DeRucci, Iowa Homeland Security and Emergency Management, 911 Program Manager.
Gerard Myers, representing the Iowa Department of Public Safety.
Mike Bryant, representing the Iowa Professional Firefighters from Ames, where the terrain is relatively flat, unless on Monday you happen to be going south on Interstate 35. That 5% slope looked like Mount Everest.
Rob Rotter, Iowa County Sheriff, representing the Iowa State Sheriffs and Deputies Association.
Rob Getter, representing the Iowa EMS Association.
Iowa APCO.
Jack D'Angelo, Sully Telephone, representing small telcos.
Mark Murphy, Dubuque County 911, representing the Iowa Firefighters Association.
Lawrence Hartpence, representing IJIC.
Carolyn Smith, Iowa Law Enforcement Academy.
Marcia Slycord, Pella Police Department.
Jeff Anderson, Marion County Emergency Management 911.
Jamie Robinson, Mass County EMA 911.
Robert Bokinski, Pella Police Department.
Diane Seifert, South Central Iowa.
Josh Stevens, Mahaska County Emergency Management.
Rodney Tucker, Iowa Utilities Board.
Ray Freeman, Consultant.
Mike Mazzatello, Consultant.
Brian Midwell, Westcom.
Terry McClanahan, Dallas County.
Doug McCaslin, Warren County 911.
Crystal McIntyre, Warren County Supervisor.
Curtis Pione, Polk County Sheriff's Office.
Brent Long, Polk County Sheriff's Office.
Mike Lauer, ICN.
Sherry Schmitz, Motorola.
Brian Flynn, Motorola.
Amanda Roush, Story County 911.
Greg Brooks, Intergym Technologies.
Jim Lundstedt, DHS Office of Emergency Communications.
George Griffith with the Iowa Peace Officers Association.
Thank you, Mark. Would our guests who have joined us by phone please identify yourselves?
Denise Pavlik, Emergency Communications Center.
Andy Buffington, Hancock County 911 Emergency Management.
Sharice Sexy, Humboldt County 911.
Brenda Vandervoort, Fayette County 911.
Bobby Wells, Stark County.
Are there any others? Okay, we'll move forward with the agenda. We'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion's carried. The minutes of December 14th have been submitted. Are there any corrections or additions? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Move approval.
Is there a second? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion's carried. Blake?
Thank you. Quite a few things to discuss today. First, the quarterly financials. Ethan, if you can go ahead and show the overhead projector camera. tried to get handouts for everyone. If I ran out, I'll try to put everything on the screen that I talk about. We also should have the quarterly payments to the PSAPs. Everything's pretty self-explanatory on that 3-page document, but I did want to highlight once again that we retained 35% of the Mills County payment, so about $10,000 less than what's shown there. We have now retained 4 quarters of surcharge, and again, that stems from their 2016 expenditure data collection form that we have not received yet. If we don't receive that by March 31st, that $40,000 that we've now retained goes and stays in the operating surplus and will eventually get divvied out to everyone, the statewide PSAPs. We did notify them again by certified mail. We have yet to receive the 2016 expenditure collection form. Also, if you look then at the quarterly financials, again, it's pretty much the same form that we show every quarter. 60% of the wireless surcharge that we received is about $4.4 million. There's currently around $16.6 million in the operating surplus, but I do want to highlight that $7 million will be sent out to the PSAPs statewide at the end of the fiscal year. That's the unused portion of the physical consolidation grants. Any questions on the quarterly financial reports? Again, those have been posted to our website and sent out a couple weeks ago. One more document to show, and I know we'll talk about actual approvals later, but I was asked by the council to show where we're at with the training fund. So that is up there now. Yep. It's split equally. That turns out to be about 61,000 per PSAP. So again, counties with multiple PSAPs double or triple that. Yep. On the training fund, again, this is $100,000 for council travel, public education, and training. We did put a policy around that last year. It kind of prioritizes in that order travel for the council, public education, and then training. And that training is kind of supposed to be over the top, multiple jurisdictions able to attend, open to registrations. So currently you can kind of see where we stand with what we've expended, about $8,500. We have obligated 4 courses already, and that we did that in December, totaling $23,000. And then again, I know it's on the agenda for a little bit later, but just wanted to highlight that there's 3 requests in for today. That total was about almost $36,000. If we were to approve all of those with no changes, there would remain $32,500, and we have until the end of June to expend those dollars. Any questions on that? I should be done, Ethan. Thanks. I know, again, legislative section is a little bit further down in the agenda, but it's also part of my report. So the Homeland Security departmental bill that we had introduced is proceeding really smoothly, actually. The House bill actually changed from House Study Bill 552 to House File 2254. And that's actually eligible for floor debate and passage anytime now. So it's made its way through the subcommittee and the committee. It was not referred back to appropriations, so it can actually be voted on anytime. The Senate side is slated to be voted out of committee today at 1 o'clock, and that is Senate Study Bill 3107. At this point, no amendments have been placed on either of those bills. They're basically as we introduce them. And really, from the couple subcommittee meetings, everything has proceeded very smoothly. I appreciate those who showed up and spoke about the bills. And I think some of the legislators were a little bit surprised there wasn't any hesitancy or pushback. So hopefully those are not the last bill standing this year, and we can actually get to work on them a little bit sooner. We did have in language within the bill that is effective upon enactment. So as soon as or if the governor signs those, we can get to work on those changes, which basically allows us to start paying for things to get the infrastructure in place sooner rather than later. Any questions on the bills at all?
Blake, with the transition from wireline to a statewide network, can you relate at what time frame that'll happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. At this point, we don't have, we're trying to do everything in the order it needs to be done. So we can't pay any bills, can't pay ICN, can't pay Zetron until the legislation is signed. So right now we're in the process of reviewing the contracts. We haven't signed anything with them, haven't paid for anything at this point, obviously. So, I'm still kind of saying worst case scenario around July. I'm hoping to have that infrastructure in place. Which means at that point, PSAPs would stop paying for wireline 911 service, and we'd absorb those costs. One thing that we did write into the bill is kind of this transitional language because we made it effective upon enactment that made it still local jurisdiction's responsibility until we notify you that everything is in place, and now we'll start absorbing those costs. So you're still on the hook until you're kind of notified that we'll start paying for that service. You have a question, Rob?
July of this year? Wow.
The last couple things I have, we're down to about 2 counties for text to 911. Scott and Pot, we continue to work with various vendors on that. We'll have every other week we touch base. We're making a little progress and just kind of making a decision now at this point at what kind of technological bridge we're going to build. But the last 2, Monona and Henry County then, are up and have their credentials on the web browser and really just need to confirm and do their testing, and they'll be up and running as well. So again, that leaves Pot and Scott for remaining text to 911 PSAPs. The other thing that I really need to note, I think I briefed in December, we were really lagging behind on annual forms that we needed to get into our office. Got a lot in December, continued to get some in January. At this point, it's manageable. So things have gone well, and the folks that still need forms submitted, I can handle it and hound them with emails. Much better than it was looking in December, though, so I appreciate those who cooperated and got those forms in. If you do still have forms, you should know about it, and please get them in as soon as you can. That should be all my report. Any questions?
Any questions from our guests on the phone? Next item on the agenda is the GIS PSAP grant approval.
Was Kasuth, Palo Alto, Cass, Hancock all requested the max $15,000, and Fayette, which has 2 PSAPs, I believe, requested $20,000, a total of $65,000. Again, this is from the front end, if you will, of the surcharge. It doesn't affect pass through. It doesn't affect surplus or anything like that. So all of them met the criteria for the GIS grants, and I'd respectfully have you discuss approving them.
Was one of those counties included the 2-county PSAP? Which county was that? Fayette. Is that included in what we're going to be talking about a little bit later?
It could be.
So if they didn't request the full $15,000 for both PSAPs, could that other 10 be allocated towards that project to use that money
If
up?
that's where you want to go, it could be.
Just for clarification.
If you want to pull that one out and approve the other ones and discuss Fayette with the GIS one.
Yes, let's do that. At this time, we'll entertain a motion to approve those grants minus the Fayette County grant.
I make that motion.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion's carried. Training fund request, Blake?
Yes, you should have 3 in front of you. The Communications Training Officer Workshop through ILEA, the Gold Line Success, and a 3 two-day each various GIS training. The Communications Training Officer for $9,900. The total of the request for the 3 GIS courses is $24,000. And it was Hancock County who requested a Gold Line Success training for $2,000. Again, the total requested today is $35,900. If they are approved as submitted, it would leave $32,500.
Okay, and do we have, I believe we have Fayette County joining us by phone today?
Yes, we do, Bob.
Okay, Brenda, is that our earlier discussion about using the balance of the GIS grant to assist in funding the GIS training? Is that acceptable to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you saying then that the separate application for Fayette County for our GIS coordinator to clean up the data would then go away? This would be instead of that application?
No. Each of your PSAPs is allocated $15,000. And my understanding is you're requesting less than that, $20,000 total for the 2 PSAPs?
Yes, that estimate was based on the hours worked by the GIS coordinator to do the polygon. And once again, I'm talking a little over my head because I don't quite understand how they have to snap the lines. But our MSAG data was, I believe, 100%. But because of the polygon, the way the center lines are drawn and the ESN lines, he needs to bring those all together. And so he based this application based on the number of hours of doing so at 333 hours, and that's where he came up with the $20,000 application. And so we used the 2 PSAPs for this application just to meet that criteria, if that makes sense.
I believe so. Everything you've requested in your GIS grant will be funded. It would just be the extra $10,000 that we would allocate then to the GIS courses from that funding source. So it wouldn't affect anything you've requested.
Okay. Would the courses, if I can ask, would the courses be cut down to just what's left of our application?
I don't believe so. I think that's the discussion point we're at right now with the council, and that's what I'll ask is the council's opinion on the new request to consider.
I have a question for Brenda. Brenda, this is Kara. This seems like good training, but you can only have 20 people in your courses. Is that right? Is that the maximum?
I don't think that was, Kara, or Sharice, maybe you can step in here too. I believe it was based on the number of students that one teacher would be able to effectively do one-on-one training with. I think if we ended up with extra people, but once again, I'm not sure what the cost would be, if there would be different, and I don't think we checked that with Jennifer. Sharice, do you know?
No, I think she was just using 20 students as just as a general guideline because that's what she could handle. I think if we went over, I don't think our price would change at all.
Okay, and this is 3 different courses, right? 3 different topics, and it's for GIS or database administrators?
Right, it's 3 different courses, and they build on each other. So they start at a very basic level, going all the way up to an intermediate level. And that's why we strategically place them a couple of weeks apart. So, the idea then is that for the newbies, they would go back and they would start using it and utilizing it and practicing it, and then come in like 3 weeks later, they would learn a little bit more, and then the final 2 days, they're building on that even in greater detail. But they are interdependent, so if you are not a newbie, you could still attend either the class, either the second class or the third class.
Okay, did I understand that the price point is $400 per student? Is that, they gave you that?
Well, initially that's what we decided on, but then she went back and she recalculated that if we didn't have 20 people, then we might not be able to justify her expense of coming. And so that's why we asked her to submit a quote that was just to do per class, rather than based on student bodies.
Okay, and I think you'll get a lot of response, but that was my question. If you just get 5 people, do you continue to hold the course?
Well, I think we do, yeah. I think we need to justify her expense. I mean, her expense doesn't change.
Okay.
Just like if we have 25, her expense doesn't change.
Good clarifications. Mike?
I have a quick couple questions. Blake, where does the, if there's a remaining balance in the $100,000 budgeted travel and training fund, where does that money go?
That is part of the $7 million that gets ultimately divvied up and split out 113 different ways.
Okay, and where does if there was unused GIS money?
Doesn't go anywhere. Again, that's part of the front part of the surcharge, so it goes nowhere.
Okay.
I mean, I guess ultimately it ends up in the surplus, but it's not like there's a limit or a floor.
Okay. So I guess that brings me to the third question then, is what is the advantage of funding $10,000 of the $24,000 out of GIS money versus the training fund? Do we anticipate using the training fund between now and June 30th?
I think what Blake referred to is if the GIS money doesn't get spent, it goes back into like the general fund.
Okay.
And so it's important for us to spend the GIS money, because that unspent GIS money does not come back to the PSAPs in an equal distribution, correct?
It ultimately all ends up in the surplus. It's more of a question of do we think we're going to get $32,000 more in travel, public education, or training requests? It's just kind of a way to leave a little bit more money available, $10,000 more money available, and just kind of maybe spend it a little bit wiser. Allow Fayette to use their entire grant allocation to help do something that's perfectly eligible under either way. Spend it out of either pot.
Thank you.
Additional comments or discussions from the council? At this time, we'll entertain a motion to approve the new requests with $10,000 being reduced from the GIS training.
So moved.
Is there a second? One last time for any additional discussion. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion's carried. We also need to approve the GIS grants. We also need to approve the GIS grants for Fayette.
So moved.
Okay, those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. Motion's carried. Reports of officers, boards, and standing committees. Technical advisory partners. Good.
Maybe it's the right place. I just wanted to share an event that happened to Westcom a few weeks ago. We experienced, I think, what? Can't hear me?
Maybe it was just me, can't hear.
Come on, Mike. We experienced what I'm going to term as a telephony denial of service attack. I think it was a low-level attack that occurred that started on a Thursday evening that then extended over the weekend and actually into the next week, where we were receiving phone calls from somewhere outside the country. The number actually came back as the country code for Iran, but CenturyLink believed that the calls were actually coming from India. What happened was Thursday evening, we began receiving multiple calls very sequentially. No one was on the line ever. They were disconnected immediately and would call right back in. Then on Friday, the frequency of the calls increased quite significantly. We were able to engage CenturyLink, whose fraud department actually was very responsive in trying to block these calls before they ever got to the country. But it continued over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Sunday morning, finally, there was actually voice contact with someone that was speaking some foreign language that we were having difficulty getting interpreted, operating under the assumption that was he saying something good or something bad? We weren't sure. So we really ratcheted up on Sunday morning and got, I think I woke up Jim Lundstedt early Sunday morning, filled out some forms online, the IC3 forms for getting DHS involved, which was very good, which brought all their resources. But what continued to happen was CenturyLink was continuing to monitor it and continuing to block these calls from wherever they were coming from, because they were actually bouncing around from different carriers getting into the country. So I really have to applaud CenturyLink that did a very good job of trying to stay on top of it, and as quickly as we would tell them, hey, they've started reoccurring, they were quickly on it saying, yes, we're seeing it, we're trying to get them blocked with those foreign carriers coming in. We've had a few stragglers that have occurred since then, but I think they've gotten bored with us and have given up and moved on to somebody else. Our biggest concern really was these were single sequential calls coming in. It was only tying up one person at a time, but we didn't know was this sort of a precursor for a much larger attack where they really were going to try to fill the circuits and truly be a denial of service. So when I was speaking to Blake about it, it didn't sound like anyone had experienced this here in Iowa yet. I'd certainly read up on denial of service attacks and the IC3 forms and the, Jim, you might help me with what NCCC stands for. They're very nice people on Sunday mornings to talk to. And actually CenturyLink too. I've got to hand it to them. As much as sometimes we struggle with our carriers, their fraud services, they were on this. They got us taken care of.
Rob, were you ever able to figure out what they were saying?
Yes. Sunday morning, when we sort of branched into two different lines of, was he saying something that was bad? So we ratcheted up through the police departments and actually made it all the way to the FBI, thinking this might be something bad, and sort of the other side of the denial of service side on dispatch. The FBI got somebody involved in, I think it was Denver, if I remember right. They're nodding yes in the back. And that it was, I think they were just swearing at us in something. Yeah. It wasn't have a nice day. It wasn't that they were going to do something bad, but, we just didn't know. It was kind of a freaky morning.
These were on 911 lines?
No, these were on our 10-digit lines.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
We're not as parochial as we might seem to want to be some days. Jim, do you have anything to add to that?
I'll discuss it in very, very general terms. We have not seen a successful telephone denial of service attack against 911, but the 911 center's administrative lines, as Rob described, it's a resource drain, and it takes a lot of resources. Imagine this against a small PSAP. This is somewhere around the 250th or so incident in the United States. I don't think, as Rob alluded, I don't recall this ever happening in the public sector in Iowa. It has happened to some classic business call centers. Beware of these kind of things where they have an employee name. As we see a lot of ransomware in the email phishing and engagement, there are some classic things where a name captured out of the public domain, a caller will call and say, Jim Lundstedt owes me money. I want to talk to somebody in HR. It's just a mitigation or an expansion of a classic ransomware attack. But what I can tell you is the carriers are very responsive to this. We have a pretty good handle on how these happen now. And as Rob alluded to, the spoofing may lead you to believe it is Middle Eastern or whatever. We actually have to get not only the carriers, but the Department of State and the FBI involved in order to move this smartly along. All of those partners are part of the NCC's 24/7 watch. I would urge you to take a look at APCO and NINA's TDOS best practices document. It talks about the Internet Crime Center, the IC3 online form, and our processes. It's not difficult, but when it happens, it will happen at the odd hour, like Rob described, starting on a Thursday night. I was actually up and debating what to do as we were going into furlough on Sunday morning, and I thought, public safety doesn't close. Furloughs don't take us out. The NKIC is open, and we were able to, I think, assist in some small way. What I would tell you is vigilance in anything that touches a public network, whether it's email or web browsing or receiving calls, is subject to disruption and is subject to bad people doing bad things. And read up on that. I would capture the information on the TDOS, Tango Delta Oscar Sierra, for your PSAP, so you won't be surprised when it happens.
If you have those documents somewhat handy, could you just send them to me and
I will.
I'll get them out?
I will be happy to do so. And I will go back to the NKIC. I'm seeking to get those refreshed because this represents a new iteration, particularly the lack of voice until quite a ways into the attack signals a little bit of a change. So I'll see if we can get those refreshed. Only other thing from a DHS standpoint I'd like to center on briefly, and I've mentioned this before at the council, Office of Emergency Communications through our SafeCom partner organization is conducting a survey. It's not a small survey. It's about a 30-minute engagement. It's called the SafeCom Nationwide Survey. It establishes a nationwide capabilities baseline assessment, an NCBA, which informs DHS, which then drives our grant mechanisms and our grant funding. That closes on February 23rd. We've had mixed compliance, but I will tell you I haven't heard enough from the 911 community. If you're interested, just simply Google DHS/SafeCom. The nationwide survey links are right on that page. It is not something you have to complete in a single setting. The cookies on your computer will let you save it and come back and complete it if there's something that you have to look up. We actually talk a lot about sustainment and cybersecurity, as well as land mobile radio and governance. These are all pieces of what we call the emergency communications ecosystem. And if you haven't taken a moment to fill it out, I would urge you to find someone in your organization that might. We really need the smaller organization perspective to make this valid. It's easy in a big organization to task a specialist or a technologist to go do this, but we'd like to have that true 360-degree view in order to report this. We actually do have to report in an anonymized form to the Congress. Are we making positive steps? Where are gaps? Where are weaknesses? So if you have time, again, it's dhs.gov/SAFECOM1M, SAFECOM. And I think you've messaged this.
Yep, I did. Both the SWIC and I have sent that out.
Right.
Another question, kind of related.
Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about the upcoming NGA workshops with emergency communication?
Absolutely. I
And
didn't
just-
know if that was on your report for the SWIC or not.
I think we both missed it. So
Okay. All right.
go ahead and I'll weigh in afterwards.
The National Governors Association has decided to revisit something that we promoted very heavily about 10 years ago, and that was efficiency and effectiveness in emergency communications comes from good governance. That's what actually created the mechanisms for what we call statewide interoperability governance bodies or statewide interoperability executive committees in many of the states. Governance is what drives all of the technologies, all of the agreements, and that oversight. In fact, I often cite Iowa as an example of a state with a very good governance model. It's morphed from its original legislative basis, but we've studied all of the states and territories. We've come up with guidance on what works and what doesn't. The NGA has asked to host 4 workshops in the U.S. this year. The first was in New Orleans about 3 weeks ago. Your peers in Kansas and Missouri participated. Along with 6 other states, we are incorporating not only land mobile radio and emergency communications, but 911, as well as we try to bring a thorough understanding of where governance is going to be most effective. And this is actually talking to your governor's office about strategies and synergies that we see as opportunities. The NGA funds this travel. It's a day and a half, pretty intensive workshop, a lot of state time that's facilitated by the NGA. And the next one is going to be conducted in Albuquerque on March 21 and 22, something like that. Iowa has identified 4 is that correct? 4 people to attend? Is that?
My only update is I'm going as well, and
Yeah,
that's what I was going to share with everyone. So
Right.
yeah, it's Tom Lampy, Chris Myers, the SWIC, somebody from the governor's office, and then myself. So
Best practice is one state did send their 911 administrator to New Orleans. One state sent only their 911 administrator to New Orleans and reported good outcomes from this. So we're hoping to involve Blake, and I'm soliciting Nebraska to participate as well, as they're your peer, and I'm trying to get their next gen 911 person to attend as well. There's not only intra but interstate challenges that we're trying to address. The NGA has been a very good partner. They're a neutral, non-political advocacy group to help governors govern well. We're working with them on cybersecurity in a number of areas, but we know that land mobile radio interoperability is not dead. FirstNet hasn't put that to bed just yet. And we certainly know that all of the pieces of the land mobile radio and the emergency communications ecosystem, which includes just about anything you can think of, soup to nuts, is part of what governance needs to address. So I believe that's the only thing I have, other than I will tell you the SWIC's team is conducting a all hazards communications technician training course this week up at Camp Dodge, and we are working on some additional training opportunities for emergency communications later in the year. Know that our commitment to get those things that are supported through our technical assistance program are a little bit hamstrung because we're getting our budget in dribbles and half steps. But after the current continuing resolution is extended, or we have a full year budget, we have a number of other things that we're working with Mr. Myers and his training committee on, which Denise Pavlik chairs. So any questions for me? And I will get you the TDOS information. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very useful and good information. Other technological partners that we have? Information? Blake, you have additional?
I just have the SWIC report, which I think is coming.
Okay.
You want me to go? Okay. The SWIC couldn't be here. He's traveling on business, but he did give me some highlights for his report. Work continues on the deployment of the ISIX platform. Nearly all the towers are constructed. Power is being run to them, and many will start transmitting within the next several weeks once the sites are optimized. A letter is being evaluated by the ISIX board to send to the PSAPs that is intended to update them on a timeline for ISIX deployment and how to access the system. Work is continuing to find means to assist PSAPs in accessing ISIX. Committee work continues on all aspects of the ISIX platform and interoperability in Iowa, ranging from subscriber units, interstate and transport interoperability, and encryption. Some of our work with encryption has made its way to the TIA TR8 meeting I'm attending, being Chris, and participating in as well. I would like to send a tremendous thank you to all of those who have participated in those meetings. Tracy Bearden has offered some assistance with trying to find more individuals interested in the ComU program. Thanks to her for volunteering. Some future work will entail initial work on the Iowa Interoperable Field Operations Guide. That work will likely be rolled out in about 3 to 4 months. And again, just to kind of reiterate what Jim mentioned, I am going to that meeting in Albuquerque with the couple people from the Interop board, as well as the governor's office representative. My goal is just to make sure that kind of our message, if anyone's been involved with the SCIP process, to make sure that the federal organizations are kind of on the same page with best practices being kind of all-encompassing emergency communication compared with the FCC, who gives slaps on wrists for what they perceive as diverting funds. So just to kind of hope further or foster that discussion at that level is kind of my aim on that. Speaking of the FCC report, that's about a month late. I haven't seen it yet. So that I'm waiting for it any day now. And that would be that second year of the LMR payment that came out in 911. So anxiously awaiting that determination.
Okay, questions for Blake or Jim? Jim, you were on the agenda as the next item. Do you have anything else? Thank you. Legislative issues? Mike, do you have anything?
No, nothing additional than what Blake pretty much already covered, that everything seems to be moving along well.
Okay, I think the one item out there that's of interest to 911 is the IPERS effort for dispatchers to be designated in the protective class. Not quite sure where that is. I am aware there's a funnel coming up. 2 weeks is the first funnel, which those bills must survive. And there's 2 different versions, my understanding is. One in the House, one in the Senate. They're slightly different. I know the lobbyists are working to bring those together. That's really about the only update I have on IPERS. Any other legislation of importance? Okay, moving on. Items for discussion from board members. From anyone that may be joining us by phone today.
Bob, this is Brenda from Fayette County, and I apologize that I didn't unmute in time for the legislation update. I have a question. Do we have a side of the EMS legislation, and I understand that it is not new this year, the Senate File 318 and I think Senate File 2060 that deal with rural EMS and funding of rural EMS?
I can check with the EMS Association and find out.
I don't have anything specific on that, Brenda. I did attend EMS Day on the Hill this morning. Making EMS an essential service seems to be the focus, but also I don't believe there's a specific bill that anybody's anticipating to get acted on this particular year. And if there's someone out here that is more knowledgeable in that than we are, please. Other questions from those who may be on the phone? Our guests in the room? Okay, moving on, it's time for election of officers. Actually, last month was the date, but we did not have a meeting last month. The officers are the president, the vice president, and the secretary. The secretary currently is Sally Hall. Sally is interested in continuing in that capacity. And in her absence temporarily, Kara Sorrells is doing that job, and we thank her for the excellent work she's been doing, and hopefully she'll continue with standing in for Sally until such time as Sally can come back. And if I could just indulge me, Kara, if you could talk a little bit about her progress.
Can you hear me? She actually is going to come to the January meeting. She was looking forward to it. That's a couple of things she wants to get back to doing is coming to these meetings and getting back to Iowa County part-time. And I think she's been in part-time some, helping get Blake's forms done. So, but she was going to be here today, but her family got her a Disney cruise. So she asked me to step in. I said I'd rather be on a cruise, but I understood. So she does want to continue as secretary, and I can continue to fill in when she's not here. So she is hitting it head on. To my knowledge, there's no new growth. Last time they had an MRI, so I think things are going well with her.
Okay, Kara, thank you. At this time, we'll open the floor for nominations for secretary. So hearing no nominations for secretary, we'll ask that the board cast a unanimous ballot for Sally Hall to continue as secretary. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. Motion's carried. Currently, our vice chair is Rob Dennert, representing the Iowa EMS Association. And Rob, are you interested in continuing?
I am.
Are there others who may wish to serve as vice chair? Like an auction, you know, going once, going twice.
Do the hammer then, too.
I'll save the hammer for the end. Hearing no other nominations, I would ask that the board cast a unanimous ballot for Rob Dennert to continue as vice chair. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion's carried. So the last one is the chair of the Iowa 911 Council. I replaced Steve temporarily in that position and serve as chair today. I would not like to continue as serving as chair, and so we'll entertain a motion from the board members for nominations for chair.
I would nominate Rob Rotter as president or chair.
Okay, we have a nomination for Rob Rotter as chair. Are there other nominations?
Mike did.
Mike seconded that motion. One more time, are there any other candidates for chair of the Iowa 911 Council? Hearing none, I would ask that the members of the council cast a unanimous ballot for Rob Rotter to chair the Iowa 911 Council. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Congratulations. Thank you. That means I get to keep it. Okay, travel requests. I would like to ask the council and Blake for permission to travel to the Navigator Conference in April, April 24 through 26. Is think we usually make that recommendation as a council. Las Vegas.
I'd make such a motion.
Okay, motion's made. Is there a second? Second by Kara. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion's carried. I will take contributions, $10 apiece. We'll see what happens. Other business from the floor. Other business from those who have joined us by phone. Okay, hearing none, the next council meeting will be March 8th here in West Des Moines. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion has been made to adjourn. Hearing no further business, this meeting is now adjourned.